Former President Donald Trump spent much of September 11th doing weird things. I believe he did commentary for a boxing match, and then followed it up by doing Korean extremist religious propaganda. Huh. Well, that's a big switch from commentary, which is fun, on 9/11, to speaking for the Unification Church. On Saturday, he spoke at this conference organized by billionaire Hak Ja Han Moon, the widow of Reverend Sung Myung Moon, who founded the aforementioned Unification Church, which is again, a cult. Moon founded the church in South Korea in 1954 before moving to the U.S. in 1971. Trump was a featured keynote speaker at the Rally of Hope event. I'm going to show you some of his speech, and then I'm going to break down who are the Moonies and what effect are they having in politics. Take a look.
I want to thank the Universal Peace Federation, and in particular, Dr. Hak Ja Han Moon, a tremendous person, for her incredible work on behalf of peace all over the world. Her story of escaping from North Korea at 5 years old, at the outset of the Korean War, is an amazing example of the power of faith in Almighty God. I also want to thank her late husband, Reverend Moon, for founding the Washington Times, an organization for which I have tremendous respect and admiration. As president, I knew that I could not simply sit by and wait for this problem to get worse. Every administration before me had failed, and that's why I was determined to pursue a different approach. The United States took an unyielding stand militarily, diplomatically, and economically. We made it clear to all that we would never be threatened with nuclear weapons. And as many of you will remember, the rhetoric got very, very tough, nasty, and mean. I knew that while any leader can wage war, it takes true courage to pursue a chance for peace. In a few decades, the inspiration that they've caused for the entire planet is unbelievable. And I congratulate you again and again.
Okay, so that was weird. Very strange. What's with the background? Again, super strange stuff going on here. Also, you might have noticed that he can't stop fidgeting. He can't stand still. Like he's like moving around. And he's a tremendous. Okay, all right. I don't know what's going on here. Weirdo. But okay, so let's get into the substance, right? So in that, of course, he talks about, we did great. My administration was really tough on North Korea, and that's why we got absolutely nothing. I mean, tremendous. Now, look, I supported the effort to denuclearize North Korea. I think that's great. Unfortunately, he failed. Didn't work. In fact, according to the New York Times, who published an article on March 26th of this year, after a Kim-Trump summit collapsed without a deal in Hanoi on February 2019, North Korea resumed a series of short-range ballistic missile tests from May 2019 until March of last year, when the tests were halted amid the coronavirus pandemic. And so, not really a result of anything that he did, kind of the whole worldwide pandemic that happened. Had Trump's diplomacy worked, and I wish it would have, there wouldn't actually be a need for tests. There wouldn't be nuclear weapons in North Korea, and they'd be on a path to denuclearization. I actually think that should be the goal for every country. There's no reason that anyone needs nuclear weapons. Honestly, it doesn't really do anybody any good if we have enough weapons to destroy the entire fucking world several times over. But, especially if you have that capability in the hands of someone who is insane. Speaking of insane, let's get to the cult. Again, the Unification Church is a cult. They believe that this Moon guy was literally the second coming of Jesus. Now, since they're the Unification, there's a couple of different layers to that, right? For one, they believe in the unification of North and South Korea. Okay. They also believe in the unification of all sects of Christianity And so the entire world is under one type of Christianity, which would be theirs. They believe that Moon had viewed, I should say, the Cold War between democracy and communism as the final conflict between God and Satan, with divided North Korea as its primary front line, or I should say divided Korea. And so this guy was an avowed anti-communist. And of course, usually when you go that route, you promote conservatism in America and, of course, religious fundamentalism. In fact, there's a publication on the conservative side that is fairly well known called the Washington Times. So now in 1976, Moon established News World Communications, an international news media conglomerate, which happens to be the publisher of the Washington Times. They also have newspapers in South Korea, Japan, and South America, partly, of course, in order to promote political conservatism. So now, according to the Washington Post, the Times was established by Moon to combat communism and to be a conservative alternative to what he perceived as the liberal bias of the Washington Post. Ah, yes, those famously liberally biased Washington Post writers. Yes, those ones who criticized Bernie Sanders for owning 2 houses. Yes, that liberal Washington Post. Are you kidding me? There is no liberal media. There's establishment media. That's what that is. But unfortunately for them, establishment media does tend to operate more in the factual world than, of course, places like the Washington Times and the conservative media outlets. So, of course, they get labeled liberal because they actually do, for the most part, believe in facts, even if their editorials are complete garbage, and tend to target progressives. So, anyway, now, there's more. In 1994, the New York Times recognized the movement's political influence, saying that it was a, quote, theocratic powerhouse that is pouring foreign fortunes into conservative causes in the United States. So they knew this all the way back then. One of the causes happened to be Liberty University, which was saved with this financial infusion from financial hardship back in the 90s. Now, they also created a myriad of groups, front groups, and they say that while Moon was not directly involved in the managing of day-to-day activities of these organizations that he indirectly oversaw, all of them attribute the inspiration behind their work to his leadership and teachings. They include the Freedom Leadership Foundation, an anti-communist organization in the United States, active in the 60s, 70s, and 80s. The Conservatives.com, a former political website in partnership with the Heritage Foundation. The Summit Council for World Peace, an international group active in Moon's effort to unite North and South Korea. Coalition for a Free World, an anti-Soviet group active in the 1980s. The Washington Institute for Values and Public Policy. CA USA International, which is another anti-communist educational organization created in New York in 1980 by members of the movement. In the 80s, it was active in 21 countries. In the United States, it sponsored educational conferences for evangelical and fundamentalist Christian leaders, as well as seminars and conferences for Senate staffers, Hispanic Americans, and conservative activists. In 1986, it produced the anti-communist documentary film Nicaragua Was Our Home. The International Coalition for Religious Freedom is another group. That's an activist organization based in Virginia. Its president is Dan Pfefferman, who has held several leadership positions within the Unification Church of the United States. Founded in the 80s, has been active in protesting what it considers to be threats to religious freedom by government agencies. There's also the International Federation for Victory Over Communism. Gee, I wonder if that's a theme. Korean Culture and Freedom Foundation. They had staged in the 1970s a public diplomacy campaign in the U.S. for South Korea. When it was founded in 1964, former U.S. Presidents Harry Truman and Dwight D. Eisenhower were named as honorary presidents, and former Vice President Richard Nixon, then practicing corporate law, was named as a director. That, of course, relationship will come back in the future in order to try to help Richard Nixon. National Committee Against Religious Bigotry and Racism. I love that. National Prayer and Fast Committees, which supported President Nixon during the Watergate scandal. So again, that relationship there, attempting to defend Richard Nixon. Moon himself defended and prayed for 3 days. I believe it was prayer and fasting for Richard Nixon to try to keep him in office, even though he was, of course, politically corrupt. So understand that there's a reason I gave you all that context. This group has been very politically active in the world and in the United States. And as such, they fund a lot of evangelical movements, religious movements, conservative movements, which happen to be anti-gay, anti-trans, anti-LGBTQIA+, et cetera, et cetera. They call for, religious freedom. But in reality, of course, that ends up usually being no freedom for other people who are not of that religion, and ends up being sort of like Christo-fascist. I think they only want their weirdo version of Christianity and nothing else. And I think that this cult only wants to see one version of their religion be adopted across the world. And I think that's what's dangerous. I think there is a conversion of, their goal, I think, is to convert everyone, pretty much like every other religion. But they have a lot of money and they have a lot of power. As I said before, the people who founded this are billionaires. So now, that said, do not be fooled by their so-called peace. So it turns out they actually make most of their income from selling weapons. Yeah, I know, like, oh no, we're for peace and we're for unification and we just want to make peace with everybody. And by the way, we make money from guns. Oh, great. They also supported racist causes, obviously. Marine Le Pen's Front National in France, and also had supported they had the Anti-Communist League. And guess who was part of that? Neo-Nazis. Yeah, of course. They also supported the war in Vietnam, obviously because, communism, right? But they also supported George W. Bush's invasion of Iraq, which doesn't seem to be their forte or any of their business. The Washington Times also, by the way, publishes propaganda for the dictatorship in Bahrain, which supports religious fundamentalist groups in Syria. So their whole mission of peace tends to be a bit misleading. Their stated mission, okay? Again, since we know that this is the same group that does these weird mass weddings with guns, AR-15s, it's real strange. Real strange stuff. And so understand, this is what I mean when I say the right wing is steeped in conspiracies and cultish behavior, right? This is exactly what I mean. And of course, it's not just, conservative politicians. Unfortunately, you also have establishment politicians. It's the same kind of deal with like the family, right? Which is this weirdo right-wing religious cult that is very extreme, and yet you've seen Democratic politicians and presidents go to their national prayer breakfasts and stuff like that. It's real strange. It's real strange. And by the way, another related cult is the Falun Gong, who is, of course, the other cult that's anti-communist, very right-wing, and they own the Epoch Times. Now, that publication, incredibly pro-Trump, and has been putting out massive amounts of COVID-19 disinformation, and, again, massively problematic. But here's the thing, right? I think a lot of this is to try to protect the wealth of the people that own it. And, look, the Moonies are incredibly wealthy, people who run the movement. So, and of course they want to, as a result, align with the right wing because they are right wing and continue to push, anti-communist or anti-socialist propaganda. And so understand that this is who you're dealing with. This is what they're dealing with, okay? This is a cult. It has a massive reach, gigantic, a huge effect on our media and our politics. And unfortunately, as I said, Trump isn't the only powerful person and former U.S. official or president who have spoken on behalf or have spoken with or has ties to this weirdo Christian cult. If you enjoyed this video, please give us a like and share with your friends. You can subscribe and help out the channel by becoming a patron. It's patreon.com/Jeff Waldorf, or you can become a channel member as well by hitting the join button below.